Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
Hello, Tamara here. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is Dr. Robin Buckley. She's an executive coach and couples coach. Thanks for joining me, Dr. Robin.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tamara.
Yes, I think I've had quite a few coaches, but everyone has a different perspective. And you being an executive coach in addition to couples coach combination. And you also mentioned that your education, training, and expertise.
So my background, actually my PhD is in clinical psych. And while I really enjoy psychology, what I didn't like was the intervention model. And so coaching allows me to approach helping executives or couples from that proactive and intentional perspective. We work on the present and guide how couples or executives want their future to be. So it's really a lovely dovetailing of my education as well as my training as a coach. And it's helped me work with couples and then more recently put out a book around the framework of how I help couples.
Okay. And we can either jump right to the book or we can talk about the framework or however you want to go next.
You're the host. I'll do whatever you want. I'm comfortable with either.
Yeah. I guess you can talk about how you came to know that this was the best strategy, or you already said you prefer coaching to the psychology side of it, but say more about that maybe.
Yeah. So when I work with couples, one of the things that I often heard was that they had tried couples therapy and it was painful or it wasn't effective because it was diving into issues from the past that at some level were irrelevant because we can't change the past. Mm-hmm. What we can fix or change is the present in order to create the future we want. And when I was working with the executives, particularly executive women, they'd come in and eventually they'd talk about their committed relationships and they would talk about conflict. And I'd say, okay, well, how do you deal with conflict at work? And they'd say, oh, no, that's different. Or they would talk about talking with the teams at work. And I'd say, well, how do you organize those meetings? Oh, no, that's different than at home. And my question started being, why? Why is it so different? If you're good at that at work, if you know the tools, if you have the strategies to make it work in a professional environment, why couldn't we just generalize that to our home life? And so I began pushing my executive clients in that direction of what could you use from your work life and implement it in your home life to enhance your relationship. And when I saw it happening from an individual perspective and then started applying it to couples, regardless of whether they're in a business environment. I mean, I worked with teachers. I worked with emergency first responders. It doesn't matter because the strategies in the book you don't need an MBA to figure them out. They're basic concepts that most of us know and understand and how we can use them in our most important partnership, which is our relationship.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle. And I know I had another episode where he discovered the same thing. People are, because he was coaching for a strategy like poker or something, and they would be in their heads worrying about a relationship instead of, focusing on the game at hand. So what did you see that helped her for the framework that you came up with, or talk about your book?
Yeah, so the business framework is looking at a relationship as we would a business that we want to succeed. And as an example, one of the first things I always ask couples is, okay, well, tell me, how do you understand a mission statement? Why are mission statements important? And if most people can tell me why a mission statement is important for a business, that it keeps, the people within the business unified, that they're working in the same direction, that it clarifies the values of the business. And so usually after they tell me all the stuff they know very proudly, they're all excited because they know the answer. And I'd say, okay, so what's your relationship business mission statement? And they look at me and I'd hear crickets. And I said, I'd say 99% of my couples, they just wouldn't have one. And I'd ask why? Because if those same benefits that happen in business could occur if we create a relationship mission statement, why don't we? And so that becomes the platform or the foundation for the relationship so that we can then apply some of the other strategies and use that mission statement as the grounding experience for them. When things get a little difficult or when things get uncomfortable, they can go back to their mission statement and say, okay, wait a minute, why are we here? What is really important to us? And that becomes a place for them to realign and reconnect. And then the work can move forward in a really productive way.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely experienced that. I have a similar thing, like we call it the Constitution. And
Yes,
when we're
exactly.
fighting, we go back and I was like, oh, we haven't been doing any of this.
Right.
Just,
That's exactly it. That, and I love that word, constitution. When I've had couples who have done this, when the couples I work with do this, it becomes a dynamic tool. It's not just something that you frame on your wall, which I don't know if any of my couples actually do that, but they put it on their phones or they put it on a post-it on their computer, so they get a daily reminder of what are we about. And in those moments, like you mentioned, Tamara, that become tense or difficult, they can revisit it so that it becomes a reminder of, wait a minute, is how we're talking to each other supportive and reflective of the mission statement? Probably not. Are these decisions we're making independently or collectively supportive of the mission statement? Probably not. And if it's a probably not, okay, then what needs to change? Is it the mission statement because now you're so different or you're in a different place in life, which could happen? Or is it more likely that your current choices are not aligned with what you established as the foundation for your relationship?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And so does the book step people through that?
Yeah. Yeah. The book is a compilation of my, 10 to 15 years of work building on this model and finally getting it all in one location so that people can go through, I'm a firm advocate that people learn in different ways. Sometimes they want to work one-on-one with someone in a very face-to-face interpersonal way. Sometimes they just want to read it in the comfort of their own home. And then in addition to that, sometimes they want to work on it. And so there's a workbook that's also associated with the book that if couples really want to work on it together in a very tactile way, they can do that. But it allows couples to decide, it's not a book that you have to go from beginning to end in just a linear way. If a couple's having issues in terms of finances, they can flip to that chapter and really dive into that first. If it's, that they are having difficulty managing the internal stakeholders, which would be children or pets or care or other people they do caregiving with, they can go to that chapter. So it becomes a personalized approach to what strategies they want to implement right away, and then maybe some other strategies that they want to get to later on.
Okay. And what's the name of the book so people can find it?
It's Marriage Incorporated, the Boardroom Blueprint to a Lasting Love.
I like it. Good title. And I know you're also a speaker. Do you talk to this as well? And
I do. There's about three kind of overarching categories that I speak to. One is certainly around this model of a business framework. But going back to my original background in psychology, I do a lot of work with companies and teams around mental wellness in the workplace. And it's not just to make sure people aren't burning out, although that's a huge topic. It's also to make sure that they're functioning at their very best. And how our brains often get in the way of our ideal and optimal functioning. So I help people learn cognitive behavioral strategies so that they're coming from the perspective of their brain being an ally rather than an adversary. And the beauty of it is that, again, as I'm teaching people this in business, we can also apply cognitive behavioral strategies like that in our relationships. How is our brain getting in the way of having a conversation with our spouse or our significant other? How is our brain getting in the way of having a firm hold on trust in our relationship? Our brains are just jerks when it comes to making us really see clearly sometimes. And so helping people understand that from a stage allows me to, in a broader way, reach a lot more of people who want that kind of support. And within that kind of category, I also do a lot of speaking around women's equity and how women specifically can build their equity and build their power once they understand how their brains are functioning. Because we know women much more so than men deal with imposter syndrome. Women much more than men deal with anxiety. And these are all experiences, emotional experiences that are coming from our brain, that are coming from our amygdala and creating that self-doubt or that uncertainty. And once you begin to understand how you can contribute to controlling that part of the brain, so your rational part of the brain actually functions, then it becomes a very powerful approach.
yeah, and it might sound, I don't know, I feel like I've never really felt imposter syndrome. I'm sure obviously there's, some women are not as much, but is it because like my personality, INTJ, I don't know if Myers-Briggs, it's more men are like that. So is it possible that my brain is somehow different and that's why I haven't had it? Or is it more of, I'm also a military veteran. Maybe I was like used to the succeeding anyways, or like having overconfidence. I don't know.
I do think our experiences and our background can shape how we view or interact with the world, Tamara. I think that whether it's successes or failures, traumas or moments of excelling, I think all of that plays a role in how we react or respond to the world. And when it comes to actual, I mean, certainly we know that in male and female brains, there are structural differences. And we haven't connected any of that to specifically around imposter syndrome. But when I've talked with women and worked with women, certainly women take on a lot of things in their life and very often blame themselves for the failures and attribute all the successes to everyone else instead of realizing that it's both. And, and whether it's failures, yeah, sometimes you contribute, but it's other things too. And success is the same thing. So are there exceptions to the rule? Absolutely, 100%. But when it comes to learning how to manage it, it isn't just for people who deal with imposter syndrome, for example, because the strategies work to truly get you to that heightened level of performance, the ideal level of performance that a person wants.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still curious to hear about it, imposter syndrome specifically, and how to overcome it for women especially. Hi, Tamara here. Just wanted to break in and say, if something you're hearing is making you think of a friend who could use this information, feel free to forward it to them right now. They would probably really be grateful for that. Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah, the first step to me, understanding any psychological phenomenon or even just how we perform, how we behave, is understanding the brain. And the two key parts to learn and remember around imposter syndrome are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And some people in your audience may have heard of these, or what I usually get from my clients is like, yeah, I've heard the term, but I don't remember what it's about. So as a quick neuroscience lesson, the amygdala is our most primitive part of our brain. It's been in existence since we were first swimming little organisms. And the amazing part about it is it hasn't evolved much. So when we were living in caves thousands and thousands of years ago, our amygdala created that sense of uncertainty or fear around fire because we didn't know how to control it and it could kill us, or the dark because there might be a lion out there that would kill us. So our amygdala has not evolved enough to realize that we don't have to fear fire anymore if we use it safely. And there's no lions outside our door, typically, but it still reacts that way. And it creates the same anxiety, fear, uncertainty, self-doubt, imposter syndrome to get us to avoid uncertain or unfamiliar scenarios. That's a problem. When we get up in front of a crowd of people to do a presentation, we don't need our amygdala telling us we're going to suck, or we're going to forget our script, or they're going to laugh at us. That's not necessary because we're not going to die up there, but it still functions that way. And the worst part about the amygdala, in my opinion, is when it's fully engaged, it shuts down the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is our strategic, logical, rational, data-driven part of our brain. And this is the part of our brain that creates our optimal level of functioning. So if we don't learn how to engage our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala is just going to run around in our brain like a toddler on caffeine. So employing strategies that engage the prefrontal cortex then shuts down the amygdala, which means it shuts down the imposter syndrome or the anxiety. But we're taught in society that emotions just happen. We can't do anything about it. We just have to deal with it. And in my world, that's BS. We can control our emotions. And one thing I love when people challenge me, and sometimes clients or people I meet will say, well, so what? We're just supposed to be happy all the time? And I'm like, oh, heck no. I am not here to tell you to live in a world of rainbows and unicorns all the time. Like, if you want to, great. I can teach you how to do that. But we can feel sad, angry, frustrated, irritated for as long as we want. But when we decide we don't want to feel that way anymore, when we decide we don't want to experience imposter syndrome anymore, that it's not serving us, we can change it. And it's learning these types of cognitive behavioral strategies that get us to do that. So our emotional experience becomes something that we actually can control, can manage, but it doesn't mean we always have to be happy. When my first German Shepherd died, I was sad. I was horribly sad. I'd never had a pet. She was my first pet as an adult. I was devastated. And when my husband said, who has some more training than me, he's like, you don't have to be sad. Like, he got to a place of appreciation and celebrating her life super quickly. And I whirled on him and I said, I want to be sad all weekend long. Sad all weekend. And he's like, okay, if that's your choice, I'll do whatever you need. And I said, thank you. And he would give me my warm, fuzzy blanket, and he would get me whatever I needed to hydrate because I was crying so much. And I was sad for 3 days, and I wanted that. But when I was done feeling that, then I did all the strategies I teach my clients to get my emotions to a place that I could function, a place that I wanted to function at. So we can manage our emotions. It's just when we want to.
Yeah. And I know it's easier said than done, but
of course,
I know. Yeah. When you're in the thick of it. But so what are some strategies to like stop yourself when you're pretty darn sure you want to stop, but you can't?
Yeah. So one of the first things, and all the strategies I talk about with clients, Tamara, are ridiculously simple. I tell them all the time, like, be prepared. You're going to be like, why did this woman go and get her PhD? These are not mind blowing. The strategies aren't hard. It's doing them in a consistent way so that they become a habit. That's what's hard, because it's really easy to fall back on how we've always experienced emotion. And one of the first strategies I suggest to clients is simply to talk back to your amygdala. So when you notice, and that the awareness is part of it, when you actually notice that your amygdala is saying, what if you screw up? What if they realize you shouldn't have this job? What if, people think they're laughing behind your back? Most people just let our amygdala ruminate and run like an ongoing, just continuous record. We don't stop it. We don't talk back. And easy analogy is, if you ever heard someone talking to, like, the amygdala to the person you love most in this world, you would shut it down. You'd be like, no, don't talk to them that way. That's not true. And I'm going to show you and give you proof of why what you're saying is a load of bull. But we don't do that for ourselves. And that's where it starts. So your amygdala is telling you all these what if, worst case scenarios. You get to actually engage your prefrontal cortex in the dialogue. So your amygdala says, what if you mess up? And you get to say, what if I'm amazing and I nail it? What if they laugh at you? What if the group is totally supportive because I know these people? What if they think you shouldn't be in this job? What if they recognize my skill and expertise? Because we don't know the future. We can't predict how anything's going to go. And so when we are letting our amygdala do the worst case scenario, why not let our prefrontal cortex offer the best case scenario? Because it could be equally possible either one of those will happen, or something in the middle. But by letting our amygdala run the dialogue, all we hear is the worst case. And that becomes our perspective and our belief system. So simply talking back, getting used to talking back, is really important. One of my clients, she was a boss babe by far, and she was CEO of her company, so she could get away with doing what she did in public spaces. But she decided, the way she said, Robin, sometimes I'm running to meeting to meeting to meeting. I don't have time to have a full-on dialogue. So I came up with a way to talk to my amygdala, and I said, awesome. What is it? So I will try and do the clean version for your podcast, Tamara, but she would say, F you, amygdala, I don't have time for your S right now. So she would just push back in a very assertive way. And she would say, sometimes I'll be in the elevator going to a meeting, and I say it, and there are people in the elevator, and they probably think I'm crazy, but I'm the CEO, so it doesn't matter. So she would just flat out in a way that she just would not tolerate it. And that became almost her mantra, where she didn't even have to go through the the questions because that shut it down quickly for her. So pretty fun, pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is cool. And was she CEO before or after she did that?
She was CEO before, but she was a better CEO after.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about how people can work with you and how to reach you?
Absolutely. So the easiest way is my website, drrobinbuckley, all one word.com. And because of the book launch, God help me, I am on 8 different platforms on social media. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn as the easy ones, and then some others sprinkled in there, but same moniker, Dr. Robin Buckley. And those snippets allow me to give really quick ways to look at your relationship or your life that are built on cognitive behavioral strategies and business.
Okay. I do have one question. If
please.
you have, I'm guessing you probably worked with people with like avoidant versus anxious attachment, because that's usually how it ends up. How do you get someone to talk more if they're the type that doesn't talk as much? Is that even something you would work on? I guess obviously a couple coach, like why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So what it comes down to, and it's funny, I just wrote an article similar to this, is about communication and what works for communication. And I know that there are some people, including me, that I like to sit and talk. I like the face-to-face. I like to have that dialogue. And there are some people who resist it or are uncomfortable with it. And if we were at work, again, we wouldn't push someone to communicate in a way that was ineffective for them. I mean, we could, but it's probably not going to go very well. So it's having some questions. What would work for you? Would it be better if we did a Google Docs where we're just writing things back and forth to each other? Would it be better if we just communicate on text message? The one that works well for a lot of people with dissimilar communication styles is they meet once a week or once a month to sit and review topics. And they create an agenda. So there's no blind sides. There's no, oh yeah, this other thing, because we wouldn't do that in business. I mean, we could, but again, we've all sat in those meetings and we're like, why is Dave bringing up this thing? It wasn't even on the agenda. It's annoying. And it does feel like you're being ambushed. So when you have an agenda, it creates that safe space of knowing ahead of time, okay, this is what we're going to cover. And if anything else comes up, we can make a second agenda for a different meeting later on. But it's just asking the question, I want to connect with you. I want to communicate with you. What is the most comfortable way for us to do that? And negotiate. Sometimes it's, could I talk for like 10 minutes and then we'll take a break and you can go respond on writing. I've seen couples create some really creative ways to get the communication they want and the alignment, but it not necessarily being only one way. And most people think of communication in a relationship as face-to-face verbal communication is the best. And I'm like, it's not the best. It's the best for certain people, but not everybody. So having that creativity and that flexibility around the ultimate goal, which is we just want to connect and be aligned. And then how do we do that? That becomes secondary to the overall goal.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I can see where that would work. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other like common things that are the issues between couples? I know probably communication in general, but like a few that you've helped.
Yeah, communication is big. Certainly if there are what I call internal stakeholders, because when we talk about internal stakeholders, it again triggers the prefrontal cortex rather than kids, pets, or elderly relatives. That's emotional, and that makes it harder to have conversations. The misalignment in caregiving or parenting, that's significant with a lot of couples, how they're going to manage that, what works for them as a couple, and then how to sustain their connection when they're trying to caretake for everybody else. So that's a big piece of that. And when you think about that, it also incorporates, when do we have time for each other? When do we make time to build our intimacy? And reminding couples that there are 5 different types of intimacy, because when we say intimacy, most people think sex. And I'm like, that's physical intimacy. And then there's 4 others. So it's helping couples really create strategies for all the areas of their life. But I would say that caretaking comes up a lot, maybe even close to communication. when it comes to couples.
Yeah, I would think finances would be one as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there a financial intimacy? Is that a thing, or is it more
financial communication and how to actually have an effective plan that both partners contribute to creating, and then that both partners can commit to? And that's a whole chapter in my book because it is so significant, especially when you have disparities in how people view money, whether it's money for fun or money for, for stability. Or is it money for now or money for the future? And how to really reconcile that so that there aren't the big blow ups or, again, the surprises that are not fun.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good time if you do like a final thoughts, closing comments kind of thing.
Yeah. Overall, what I hope people understand is that their career, their relationships, their individual life really can be what they want it to be. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. Doesn't mean it's going to go smoothly, but we can create what we want. It does take two things: a preventative approach and an intentional approach. So preventative in that we're not waiting for things to happen. We're constructing it ahead of time. We're looking and analyzing to avoid any issues. And then intentional. We are in a deliberate and dedicated way, making the smaller big steps to achieve what we want in those areas of our life.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And
awesome. Thanks, Tamara. This is great.
Yeah, and I say, if you love this episode, be sure to tell your friends about it and rate it as well. And of course, follow the show. All right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Robin.
Thank you so much, Tamara.
Alrighty. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Frank Talk, sex and dating educates.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to point out that there is a send us a text message at the very beginning of the description, and you can use that to send an anonymous question or comment. So I'd really appreciate it. All right. Thanks.